What's up everybody, and welcome back to the Cyclonic Thrift channel. This week we've got an exciting new deck tech for you, a deck building video, more appropriately. We're going to be taking some cards that I have already in my own collection, a commander that I've already owned, and assemble those cards into a functional commander deck that's going to be a lot of fun to play and doesn't cost you anything, right? Because you're building from your own collection. Today we've got Jared Carthlion, true Heir. He's a Naya commander, a 3/3 human warrior. When he enters the battlefield, target opponent becomes the monarch, and you can't become the monarch this turn. So it prevents you from putting Jared down and then picking someone who doesn't have any blockers and then attacking with a different creature to just take the monarch right away. You kind of have to wait around to your next turn to be able to take that back. Which is a big deal, because the second ability on Jared is that if damage would be dealt to Jared Carthalion while you're the monarch, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on it. That's a massive upside for something that this deck is going to be aimed around. Being able to use this as a free blocker, free attacker, it's just, as your commander, a lot of kill spells use damage. It's going to totally neutralize those and in fact make him bigger. This is a perfect commander for the Voltron strategy, which I'm taking this deck in for today. The direction that I'm going with is we're going to make Jared as big as possible. We're going to swing in for a ton of damage. We're going to try to, become the monarch and keep the monarch as long as we can. But even if we don't, even if we're not able to kind of wrench it back from our opponents, Jared is going to be big enough on his own to be able to take care of a bunch of threats for us. So how we're going to do that with very classic Voltron strategy is you focus on building up this one individual creature, in this case being Jared. And you can do that a couple different ways. You can do that with equipments. You can do that with buffs, +1/+1 counters. Because Jared already kind of does his own +1/+1 counter synergy, that's not really the direction in terms of the buffs that I'm going with. I wanted to look at auras. I wanted to make this deck largely about putting auras on Jared Carthalion. There's a few artifacts, equipments in here that were just too good to not put in the deck, but the vast majority of the buffs that we're going to be putting on Jared will be in the form of an enchantment aura. And so, because of that, we want to make sure that our supporting pieces are able to kind of synergize with that strategy. So, cards like Jukai Naturalist, it's green and a white for a 2/2 human monk, has lifelink, and enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. It's going to give us a discount on all our auras and just make them easier to throw on Jared, and quicker to throw on Jared. And in the same vein, we've got Starfield Mystic. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 human cleric. Enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, exact same. But then also has, whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on Starfield Mystic. Now, one downside of auras is if the creature that they're on gets killed, they don't stay around, right? They're not like equipments in that way. They will go to the graveyard, and you'll have to get them out at some point for something else. But Starfield allows us to get some benefit from that, right? So if Jared gets taken out for some reason, gets destroyed, gets exiled, all that stuff, all those auras were going to go to the graveyard. We get a bunch of +1/+1 counters on Starfield. It's not gonna win the game for you, but it is an upside to losing all of those auras if and when that happens. For card draw, I also wanted to focus on the aura theme. So there's no better card than SRAM Senior Edificer. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 Dwarf Advisor. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. So the equipment and vehicle side of this is not quite as important. Again, we have a few equipments in here, but not many. But we've got a ton of auras. So being able to cast our auras and replace them in our hand just like that for a 2-mana creature is something that we're going to be able to take full advantage of throughout this game. And then Inspiring Call, it's 2 and a green for an instant. You draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, and those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. This is I fully admit this is a decidedly better card in go wide strategies where you're putting +1/+1 counters on a ton of creatures and you can protect your whole board. Totally understand that. But I did really like how it combined card draw and protection for our commander, because again, Jared is going to be a huge target on the field. Your opponents are not going to want him to let him stick around and get any bigger than he already is. They're going to try to take him out. So this card on its own, just being able to protect Jared, most likely, because he'll most likely have at least a +1/+1 counter on him, is huge. And then to be able to draw a card, mainly incidentally, is just helpful. It's an instant speed, and hey, you've got 2 or 3 other creatures out there that also happen to have +1/+1 counters on them. Draw a couple extra cards, all the better. But really, the combo of card draw and protection was what convinced me to put this card in the deck. And in keeping with the +1/+1 counter strategy, I've also got Lae'zel, Vlaakith's Champion, 2 and a white for a 3/3 Gith Warrior. If you would put 1 or more counters on a creature or planeswalker you control, or on yourself, put that many plus 1 of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. So it's a mouthful, but essentially for this deck, it just means whenever we put a +1/+1 counter on one of our creatures, we get an additional one, right? So, you know, it doesn't exponentially increase, right? If you put 1 +1/+1 counter on Jared, you get 1 more. If you put 5 +1/+1 counters on Jared, you get 1 more, right? It packages it together so it doesn't snowball out of control. But we're going to be putting counters on Jared. He's going to be gaining counters from blocking and receiving damage. So this is just going to help expedite our strategy in that sense. And then another card, Invigorating Surge. It's 2 and a green for an instant. You put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on that creature. I mean, this is just... It's perfect. It's perfect for this deck. It's at instant speed, so you can use it as a bit of a combat trick. Obviously, you don't have to use it in combat if you're not looking to fool anybody. But if you happen to use it, this is gonna be a blowout play at some point. So we also want to have cards in this deck that we can choose to deal damage to Jared ourselves, right? If the gameplay is getting stalled a little bit, we're a bit of a standoff with our opponents. These next 2 cards are going to be able to initiate some board changes. Are going to be able to catalyze some attacks. So the first card like that is Provoke the Trolls. It's 3 and a red for an instant. It deals 3 damage to any target, and if a creature is dealt damage this way, it gets +5/+0 until end of turn. Now this is just a very versatile card. On its face, it almost looks like you can do the 3 damage to Jared, get the 3 counters, and then it also gets +5/+0, so you get like a 8 power boost for 4 mana, which would be awesome. It actually won't work like that, because if for example, if Jared is on the field and you're the Monarch, it's going to deal the 3 damage to Jared, but instead of dealing the damage, that damage is prevented because you're the Monarch, and it'll get the 3 counters instead. So it'll only do the counters. And then the second sentence is if the creature is dealt damage, it gets the buff. Jared wasn't dealt the damage because it was prevented, so it won't get the +5/+0. So in that case, you've paid the 4 mana to get 3 +1/+1 counters. Not an amazing trade-off, but with all the other +1/+1 counter support in our deck, just doing that is gonna have some ripple effects across the board state. Now, if you're not the Monarch, right, then Provoke the Trolls will deal the 3 damage. Jared will take the 3 damage. Hopefully you've buffed him up to where he's not 3 toughness anymore and he won't die. But then he will get that buff of the +5/+0, which might just be exactly what you need to just get that extra little damage in to finish off a player. It could be very useful as a combat trick as well. So there's versatility there, and if worse comes to worse, it can also be a good old-fashioned removal spell, right? If you've got a problematic creature on the other side of the board, it's got 3 toughness or less that can kill it. Horrible rate, 4 mana for that. I totally get that. That's not what this card is meant to do, but you know, when the going gets tough and you're down to your last few cards and you just need to get that guy off the board, then this will do the trick. And then one of my favorite includes in this deck, particularly 1 for its removal ability and 2 for its buff ability for Jared, is Sheevan Meteor. It's 3 and 2 red for a sorcery, and it deals 13 damage to target creature. It also has Suspend, right? You can pay 3, suspend it with 2 time counters on it. You know, kind of delay that until later in the game. This thing is going to win you games. I mean, paying 5 mana to put 13 +1/+1 counters on Jared, who's already going to be buffed to the moon, is a game ender, unless somebody has an answer. And even if you want to suspend this and kind of, you know, give your opponents a heads up, what you can do is, hey, if you remove Jared so I can't target it with Sheevan Meteor, I'm just going to target one of your things with it instead, so don't do that. It might not be enough of a deterrent to get them to remove the commander you're about to put 13 +1/+1 counters on, but, you know, you never know. But yeah, this card, this is a blowout card, right? For 5 mana, we're adding 13 damage to Jared. That puts him at 16 just off on its face. And then depending on how many auras, how many other things we've done during the game, again, this could turn Jared into a one-hit kill based on the state of the board. And yeah, that brings us to the end of the deck tech. You might have noticed I didn't really talk much about the actual auras that are in the deck. That's just because I wanted to focus more on the support pieces and talk about the different categories of strategy that we'll be using. But please feel free to check out the full deck list in the description. You'll be able to see all the auras that we've got in this deck. It's quite a bunch, and quite a few other support cards that I wasn't able to get to in this video that really make this deck just very synergistic and fun to play. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys took some inspiration. If you can think of any cards that I missed or should have included, again, this is from my own collection, so it definitely is not the ideal deck build that I might do with some of my other videos. For example, Blasphemous Act, you know, not a budget card per se, but absolutely would have included that in this deck if I could, right? Dealing the 13 damage to each creature, it works as a board wipe and as a pump for Jared. It's just a beautiful card in this deck. But if you can think of any others, please let me know in the description. Always love hearing from you guys. It's always educational. As always, if you're not already, please subscribe, like the video, share it with some friends. Until next time, stay safe and stay thrifty.